Hello, everyone, and welcome to the episode of self care. Now, I know what you're thinking. You are already a professor, achieved your doctorate level of consistency when it comes to self care. And it is the number one thing that the majority of human beings are really good at. So, if you believed anything that I just said, um, take another listen as to what I just said. Self care is the number one thing that people hey, Ian, thanks for popping on. Self-care is the number one thing in my experience in the 20 plus years of working with people so that they could achieve their personal and professional goals. Self-care is the number one thing that usually doesn't even make it to the table. Why is it the number one thing that most people do not consistently do? And how do you consistently put yourself first without falling off, without feeling guilty, and without feeling the dreaded selfishness? So let's get started. So, why do we usually feel selfish when we put ourselves first? And that is because, in general, society has taught us that when we succeed, it is at the expense of others, which means that we're bad people for putting ourselves first. And this creates that disconnect that we often struggle with. So there's a difference between everyone's on their own type of mentality, like you take responsibility for your own life, you follow your own passions, you follow your own dreams, which is true. You have to follow your own passions. You have to live your own life. No one else can live your life for you. No one else can achieve things for you. No one else can fail for you. People can fail you when they've given you their word that they're going to do something for you. However, despite what anybody else does for you or doesn't do for you, it shouldn't derail you from your self care. Easier said than done, right? So, how is putting yourself first not selfish? Well, that's a really great question. And here's how I'm going to answer it. And here is what I have said to people throughout all of my time working with people. It doesn't matter if you are a mom of one child, 7 children, husband, single mom, grandmother, grandfather, aunt, uncle, boss, it doesn't really matter. What I have said, the difference between selfish and good self care is, in my opinion, you are being selfish if your self care is at the expense of someone else. So let me give an example of that. If you choose to eat healthy foods but only feed your kids pasta 3 meals out of the day because it's cheap. That is good self-care for yourself, but it's at the expense of the health of your child. Selfish is going to the coffee shop on your way home and only getting yourself a coffee, coming in the house with 4 other coffee drinkers, and you didn't think to say, "Hey, I'm stopping at the coffee store. Do you want me to grab you something?" So that's when your self-care could leave other people out. Yes. Can they go to the coffee shop themselves and get themselves a coffee? Yes, absolutely. But when we have relationships with people that are meaningful, purposeful, and healthy, we want to nurture each other. We want to, yes, take care of our own coffee craving, right? But also to think of the impact it's going to have when you show up at home and other people are like, "Oh my God, like I can smell that. And oh, it's going to taste so good. Like, where's mine?" Right? That's when self care crosses the line into being selfish. And it doesn't mean that you need to think of others all the time because you don't. You can go to the coffee shop and you can get yourself a coffee. You don't always have to bring back one for everyone else. However, when you nurture the relationships in your life, first and foremost, when you nurture your relationship with yourself, you will inherently nurture relationships with other people at the same time because it goes hand in hand. And you'll quickly realize when the relationships in your life are not healthy, you'll quickly realize like when you need to draw some boundaries with them, when you need to um, get rid of cluttered toxicity, really, right? So, how do you bypass the guilt of putting yourself first, of really practicing really good self-care without feeling guilty about doing it? Now, gonna go a little deep here. Um, the guilt you feel about putting yourself first was given to you without your consent. And by that, I mean during your foundations of growing up, during your foundations of development, during your building blocks of your overall mindset, which is your thought, your attitude, and your disposition of life, of every single thing you do, that's your mindset. So during your primary years of development, somebody gave you the message along the way, whether it was once or probably throughout, that doing things for yourself was not okay. Maybe it was modeled for you. Maybe it was modeled for you. Maybe you were raised by an adult who were completely selfless, right? Now, I truly believe that there are people in life that live a completely selfless, serving of others lifestyle, and that works for them. You know, if you think of different religions, whatever you might label any of them, there are people that feel like their purpose in life was to serve others and only take care of their basic needs. If that's what they value, and if that's the life they feel like they were born to live, then that's wonderful for them. I'm glad they found that, right? That's not the case for the majority of people. So, what I mean by, was it modeled to you that you needed to live this selfless, non self serving life? Were you raised, or did you have an adult in your life who was always doing something for other people? Always, always, always. Always showing up to all the meetings, always showing up to school, always volunteering, always running everyone's kids all around, always baking, always sewing, always doing that stuff, right? Doing something in service for other people. But it seemed like they never really did anything for themselves. They had no hobbies. They didn't, in these days, they would never stop and buy themselves a cup of coffee because that money could be spent on doing something for someone else. Was that modeled for you during your years? If that's the case, then that's where some of that guilt could come from. So, how do you start to put yourself forward? How do you start to put yourself first every single day? I would say start small, because if you start too big, it's going to feel really scary. It's going to feel like an itchy wool sweater, and it's going to be something that is not sustainable. So these might seem like really simplistic ways, and these might seem like, oh, geez, Colleen, really? You're going to get that small on me? But the foundation and the plan to put yourself first and have really good self care is important in these small ways. So, number one, Set an alarm every morning. 7 days a week. We know from science, we know that if you stay on the same biorhythm, you get up at the same time, you go to bed at the same time, in general, doesn't mean you can't go to that late night concert, but in general, if you get up at the same time, go to bed at the same time, your body is working optimally. You're getting a good night's sleep. It's not chaotic. It's not all over the place. So set an alarm for yourself. If you want to sleep in an extra hour on Saturday, Sunday, then do that. However, if you look forward to sleeping until 11, 12 o'clock on a Saturday or a Sunday, because that's where you perceive that you're getting your value back, you're not. You're actually just doing more harm to yourself by throwing off your whole biorhythm. Another thing that you can do is meditate. Now, this can be done in a plethora of different ways. Meditate could mean you simply sit without any external stimulation and you think about something for 3 minutes. It doesn't mean that you have to clear your mind, doesn't mean that you have to get to this next level of consciousness. There's all different levels of meditate, and I'm going to use it in the terms of reflect. Reflect on your morning, reflect on your yesterday, set different goals for yourself. A third way that you can put yourself first every day is to prioritize your fitness. Go to the gym, exercise, walk outside, lift some weights at home, do some yoga, do some Pilates, do some HIIT training, do some CrossFit. I was at the gym recently and I was watching this CrossFit competition on TV. Holy moly. I was like, wow, those athletes are some serious athletes. Do something for your physical fitness every single day. Number 4, spend 15 minutes a day doing exactly what you want. If you want to sit and drink a cup of tea, drink a cup of coffee, drink some unsweetened sweet tea, drink some sweetened sweet tea, or anything in between, and stare out your window and watch the leaves blow, do that for 15 minutes. Do something every single day for 15 minutes doing exactly what it is that you want to do. Eat. Eat 5 times a day, 3 meals, 2 snacks, or 6 micro meals. Some people follow that because they find like it keeps their hunger from coming too much, right? Whatever works for you. But eat food that fuels your brain. Eat food that fuels your body, that keeps you going, that gives you that energy to accomplish everything that you need to accomplish in a day. Practice affirmations. It's another good way that you can spend time doing self-care and not be selfish. Smile at yourself in the mirror. That's a big one. I find that most people who have things that are painful, whether they're on the surface painful, whether they're under the surface painful, they have a hard time making eye contact. They have a hard time making eye contact even with themselves. So look at yourself. You could actually even, I follow and I love, the only podcast I listen to was Mel Robbins. Love her to pieces. And I selfishly, well, maybe not selfishly, but I see a lot of myself in her, the way she delivers her message. I am certainly not anywhere on the same um, platform as her. She's famous. I'm not. But I see a lot of how I think. I see a lot of what I say, how I say it. I see a lot of myself in her. So I listen to her podcast. I love Mel Robbins. So if you really want to challenge yourself to do and improve your self-care, go listen to her book, The High Five Habit. It's amazing. It's truly amazing. But do something for yourself every single day like that. Another thing why putting yourself first is hard is like I talked about, like the mindset stuff and during the development, the years of your development, there are cultural norms around hard work. There's cultural norms around showing up for yourself or showing up for one another, right? Like, for instance, some families, and this could be your family culture, you are taught that love means never saying no to anyone. And those types of beliefs, the types of beliefs that taking a break for yourself, sitting, having your cup of tea or cup of coffee or sweet tea or whatever it might be, and watching the wind blow the leaves for 15 minutes is that resting equals laziness. And those are cultural norms, family norms that are given to us without our consent by the adults that were there. And these types of beliefs, and there's many, many more, but these types of beliefs make it harder to be unapologetic about taking care of yourself. Again, there's a difference between being selfish, self absorbed, and having really good self care. So, how do you know if you're being selfish? Um, Again, in my definition and the definition of a lot of other people, being selfish means that you have no regard whatsoever about how your choices, your actions, your behaviors affect others. So you consistently put your own self serving before others. So that's how you know that you're being selfish versus having really good self care. So, for instance, this morning I set my alarm 5:45. I'm a mom. School's going back in session pretty soon, so my day is going to start at 4:45. Well, I've gotten into the luxury over the past couple weeks of summer vacation that I could sleep without an alarm. I know if I wait until that day that I have to get up at 4:45, it's going to be really hard for me because I'm going to be staying up too late because now I've shifted my whole biorhythm to going to bed at like 10 or 11 and waking up at 6 and 7 versus going to bed at 9 or 10 and waking up at 5. So I've shifted, just by an hour or two, but I've shifted to sleeping just a little bit later. So again, in 3 weeks, that's going to change. So I made a decision that starting this morning and moving forward, my alarm is going to go off at 5:45. And then that way, when that Tuesday comes and I need to get up at 4:45, it's not going to hit me as hard. So I get up at 5:45 and I lay in bed and I gently wake up for 15 minutes. I, think about whatever I'm going to think about, reflect on whatever I'm going to reflect on, sit in gratitude, all that stuff. And then I get up, put on my workout clothes, drink some water, go downstairs, jump into my workout routine. And then, once I'm done with that, I start my day. And me waking up earlier in the morning does not directly impact anybody in my life because that self-care routine doesn't take away from anybody else in my life. So just food for thought. I would encourage you to take a look at your daily routines. Take a look at what you do, what you don't do. Why do you not do it? And why do you do it? And figure out what is serving you. And is there anything that you're doing that is directly impacting another person in your life? And really take a good solid look at that and try not to feel guilty about it if there is something, because you're all adults and you can change what you're doing. You can change the reason behind why you're doing it. We're not tied to anything, and most things in life aren't permanent. So um, I hope this was helpful, and I hope that you are all able to find a really good self-care routine. And I will see you all next week. Talk to you all next week.